Karisto, Kalimera Sas, thank you Apostolos, thank you Angeliki, thank you all of the people who have worked to make today's meeting a reality. For those of you who don't know me, I'm here wearing two hats. I am the chairman of NAMEPA, the North American Marine Environment Protection Association, and I'm here with my co-founder and executive director, Carleen Leiden-Kluss, who is sitting right there. We are the lineal descendants of HELMEPA, the Hellenic Marine Environment Protection Association, which was founded here more than 30 years ago, almost in this building, but not quite. Therefore, many of you who are familiar with HELMEPA will have some idea of what NAMEPA is. I'm also a principal and managing partner of the Marshall Islands Ship Registry. That's my second hat, if you will, and that is primarily what I'm going to speak to you about today, wearing that hat, because the subject of my talk today, and I'll try to keep within 15 minutes, Mr. Chairman, is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill and oil well blowout that took place in the Gulf of Mexico, south of the United States, just off the coast, beginning on April 20th, 2011. The ancient Greek travelers and writers, historians, noted that when they visited certain parts of the Mediterranean basin, and as far as what is now the modern Iraq, Mesopotamia, there were pools formed on the surface of the land of what they called bitumen, which today we call oil. Even then, oil was collected on the surface where it reached the surface for various purposes, primarily medicinal. Since ancient times, oil has become more generally in use and a more vital commodity than it was in the Hellenistic period that I'm speaking about. More recently, an American Minister of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, spoke famously about known unknowns and unknown unknowns. And we, over the years, since the Torrey Canyon disaster in the 1960s, and the Amoco Cadiz, and the Brer, and the Prestige, and the Erika, have come to know oil spills. They are, thanks to the work of the European Commission, certainly of the IMO, certainly of some flag states, and I hope the Marshall Islands is one of them, Greece certainly is, have reduced the number of major oil spills. But they still occur, and when they occur with disastrous results. The words of Einstein, being wise to avoid, that we saw up here a minute ago, are very appropriate to a discussion of protection of the seas and for prevention of oil spills. It is wise to avoid major ecological disasters. Unfortunately, most of our emphasis has been on response to oil spills, because the prevention of oil spills is much easier to speak about than it is to do something about. Later today, we're going to talk about piracy. Ms. Leiden-Kluss and I just left a meeting in Limassol in Cyprus where there was considerable discussion about piracy, but it took a predictable form. We talked about how terrible it is and our own shortcomings in preventing piracy and dealing with it. We never really got around to talking about solutions, what concretely could be done. Unfortunately, although the international community, led by Greece, as a matter of fact, has been very influential in passing laws within Europe and also at the International Maritime Organization, aimed at curbing oil spill pollution and dealing with it. We seldom speak about how to actually prevent a spill. Or if we do speak about it, we express great frustration. And the reason we do that is that, first of all, as I'm sure most of you know, no two major oil spills have ever been exactly alike. For the most part, they result from human error in nearly all cases. However, it is also true to make certain general statements from the point of view of the private sector of the maritime industry, which I, as a flag state representative and as a participant in a non-governmental organization, or NGO, namely NAMEPA, I don't know if there's anyone here from NAMEPA today, but I think they would agree. We have not been able to actually come to grips with some of the major problems that come to light, and certainly came to light with regard to the Deepwater Horizon or Macondo oil spill. And as you probably know, that was not from a tanker at all. That was from a very deep oil well that actually was not properly cemented and resulted in a catastrophic leakage of gases and drilling mud, as it's called, from the actual well itself, with almost an immediate fire and explosion and the tragic loss of 11 lives. The first thing that I think is sometimes lost sight of is the fact that we have been very active, we in the international community. I have been a delegate to the legal committee of the International Maritime Organization. A number of us here today have been more active than I have. And various legislative responses have been created and adopted over the years to prevent major oil spills. And we have seen a considerable measure of success, not only within the European Union, within the Commission, here in Greece, in the United States, and also internationally at the IMO. But still, these major disasters occur. The International Safety Management Code is one such legislative fix, if you will, created in 1993 at the International Maritime Organization. That code is now a part of Greek law, it's a part of community law, it's a part of United States law, and it's part of the law of every major flag state. It was drafted as a document as part of the SOLAS, the Safety of Life at Sea Convention. It is mandatory, and it governs a whole series of programs that the ship owner or the vessel operator, including the owner of a mobile offshore drilling rig and the operator, are supposed to comply with. It can be said with full authority that in the case of Deepwater Horizon, there was a massive ISM code failure. And what happened, frankly, when this major disaster occurred, starting on April 20th, 2010, and it happens with every major oil spill, including oil spills from that originate with vessels, in other words, tankers, is that the regulators are blamed. The flag state is blamed, the coastal state is blamed. Almost all the time, there is a very vehement public response, made more potent by the fact that there is very visible environmental damage. This was true, for example, in the sinking of the ship in the northern Pacific called the Selendang Ayau, which was a car carrier that caused a great deal of loss of life of seabirds. I won't go into the economic costs, but in the case of BP, the owner of, or at least the contractor, the charterer of the well, and builder of the well, and the rig, and the other companies associated with it, the costs have reached some 40 billion, or will be reaching very soon, 40 billion with a B, US dollars. This is a tremendous loss. Most companies cannot sustain it. Certainly there's hardly a shipping company that could. And it's questionable if the existing insurance market can sustain a cost like that. Now, what are the solutions? One of them is that we are trying to find a way to enforce the International Safety Management Code, which is basically an elaborate audit system. But it really requires that flag states, coastal states, governments, and stakeholders, in other words, counterparties, also be able to audit compliance. And that is where the problem lies. It is very difficult to audit a process. We tend to be very metric. We're an industry of engineers. But this is not a metric problem. This is a problem of human compliance. And it requires a degree of oversight that governments cannot afford financially. In fact, it's very likely that governments will be less able to afford in view of the world financial crisis that is affecting virtually every government in the world today. So what to do? One thing that can be done is something that Apostolos alluded to in his opening remarks, and that is that modern electronics and computer technology allows us to analyze what kind of ships will be entering our ports and our economic zone, what kind of drilling will take place. Interestingly, in Cyprus in the past week, there was a great deal of discussion and excitement about gas and oil reserves in the Eastern Mediterranean. We've heard about that for many years, but now there is a great deal of attention being paid to very promising signs that there will be offshore oil drilling. I don't doubt that this is going to affect a great deal of the Mediterranean basin, including offshore Libya, for example, and probably, in fact, definitely Cyprus, Israel, Turkey. This is going to require resources, prevention resources, response resources, that are not around at the present time. We attended 2 weeks ago an exercise, an oil spill response exercise in the Baltic at Nynäshamn in Sweden under the Baltic-Helsinki Agreement. The Baltic nations, including Russia, Sweden, the Baltic states, are very actively massing resources to respond to oil spills. Booms, collection vessels, skimmers, and also volunteers. I would suggest that the Deepwater Horizon, which attracted a great deal of attention and brought people, volunteers came to the United States because this gusher of oil coming out of the Earth's crust lasted more than 2 months. People came from as far away as Finland, and equipment from as far away as the Baltic was deployed in the United States. The United States has a very elaborate incident command structure to deal with major disasters. This was the first time it was applied to an oil spill. Something along those lines is going to have to exist within the Mediterranean area to respond to an offshore oil spill, whether it comes from a well or whether it comes from a vessel. And the reason it is that the political response and the public response to an oil spill is overwhelming. So is the financial cost. Risk management attitudes, in conclusion, are going to have to change. Up to now, there has been an assumption that if there was a major oil spill, a ship owner or an operator or other private party could insure against the cost. That may be true, and it may continue to be true to a large extent in the future. But as I think we're going to hear in the course of today's discussion, much of the problem that is faced when an oil spill takes place is political. The public outcry, the demands from our political leaders that offshore drilling be shut down, that ports be closed to the flags of certain nations, ships flying those flags, the response to certain companies. In short, a major oil spill is economically life-threatening to any ship owner or shipping company. And I think here in Greece, that should resonate, and we should note that that is a real fact. Therefore, the wise to avoid injunction from Albert Einstein is very well taken. In conclusion, I would like to just point something out to you. When the Selendang Ayau, which I realize is a ship that you've probably never heard of, hit the rocks in the Aleutian Islands, having lost all power, it dumped its bunkers. And the bunker spill killed about 50,000 birds of a particular species. 50,000 birds. The results of that and the cost of that are still being felt. And not because it was up in Alaska, which is a very sensitive area. If something like that happens here, the consequences are going to be enormous. So the ISM code has got to be carefully reevaluated in terms of how we analyze compliance before the spill takes place. And that's where information technology comes in. That's where a more sophisticated approach by governments, including the flag states, come in. We have got to be able to spot non-compliance much sooner, and we realize that. Port states, coastal states, the European Commission, EMSA, the Greek government have got to have much better data so that the deficiencies that exist out there, and by no means are they related to the private sector, they're also governmental shortcomings. We found that the United States government was unprepared for many aspects of this bill. They have to be discerned, observed, noted, and I cannot emphasize strongly enough, there must be exercises and drills, more so than we see in military matters. The drill in Sweden involving about 7 Baltic countries, including Russia, was quite elaborate. An earlier drill that we participated in the United States, in Puget Sound, near the city of Seattle, was almost as elaborate. I'm not aware of any major oil spill drills that are taking place in the Mediterranean region. But the same sort of thing is going to have to happen. And the difficulty there, and I think governments here realize this, certainly the French government has, is that you're dealing with about 20 different countries around the Mediterranean basin. Not all of them in the EU. Getting all of these countries organized and getting an inventory of the resources that are needed is going to be a very difficult task. But I urge that it be undertaken without further delay. Thank you very much, and I look forward to listening to your questions, and I hope that I can help answer some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine.